This is the North Mobile Post Radio Show, and I'm your host, David Merrill. Tonight's big story is, of course, President Barack Obama's acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention. I thought he gave a pretty good speech. Not his best speech. I don't actually think it was the best of the night even, but a good speech nonetheless. I actually believe the best speech of the night went to John Kerry, who just gave a blistering attack on Mitt Romney, particularly on foreign policy, and a great speech overall. Best speech I've ever heard from John Kerry. Far better than anything he gave in 2004. If he could have gave that kind of performances back then, he might have won the presidency from George W. Bush. But it was a very good speech from Kerry. Loved that speech. Joe Biden gave a very passionate speech, very emotional speech. His was also very good. And then President Obama, it was a very general speech, not big on policy, very similar to Romney's speech in that regard. Neither candidate gave much policy. It was more, kind of generally uplifting, talking about the future. And the biggest key to the speech to me, and I think this is the only part of the speech really to me that could move maybe voters who are iffy about who to vote for, was the part where he says America has not failed. He said he still believes in America, blah, blah, blah. But that whole America has not failed because, and this is a dangerous tightrope the Republicans are walking on when they talk about the bad economy and how, they say the president's failed and the country's failing and all that. People don't generally like to hear that. People don't want to hear that the country's going down the crapper. And by constantly this negative campaign, they kind of, push that narrative. And tonight, they made the statement, with the argument for the auto bailouts and the success it's been with General Motors. The Democrats, despite being the incumbents with a poor economy, are running on the more positive campaign in that regard on jobs, saying, hey, look, we bailed out General Motors and it's flourishing, and that's going to be crucial in states like Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. So, yeah, that statement I thought was crucial. I think that could maybe move some voters. But as I've said before, generally, I don't think there's a lot of people that are undecided. I'm with Joe Trippi on that. He was the former campaign advisor to Howard Dean, and he's a Fox News analyst now. I'm with him on that, though. I don't think there's a lot of undecided voters. I believe most people have made up their mind. These polls, it's not like they call everybody. They call like 1,000 people. It's a sampling. So they think, oh, well, if some people say they're undecided, people say that because undecided voters get a lot of attention these days, and people watch TV and know that. But for the most part, people have made up their mind about this election. At this point, you know what Barack Obama's about. You're either for him or against him. And Mitt Romney, enough has been done on him. People know whether they're for or against him. And most people just know if they're Democrats or Republicans. One of the key takeaways from this convention and the last week's convention, I thought there was a lot more energy at the Democratic convention. Those delegates seemed more fired up. The people there seemed more fired up. The speakers seemed more fired up. And as for the delegates and all, I think it's just a clear case of Democrats are for Obama. They're passionate about Obama, whereas Republicans are not as passionate about Mitt Romney. They just hate Barack Obama. It's not so much that they're voting for Mitt Romney, it's that they're voting against Obama. And I don't know I don't know where the advantage lies in that. I would think maybe that slightly favors Obama for the fact that because his supporters like him so much, they're going to go out and do more in the ground game and in volunteering and, to get the vote out. And that's one thing Joe Trippi says. This is a base election. Who fires up their base the most, who gets more of their voters to the polls. And in this country, I do believe there are more registered Democrats than Republicans. It's close, and 2010 really closed the gap a lot, but there's more Democrats than Republicans. Even though there's more conservatives than liberals, the country's 40% conservative, maybe 20% liberal, 30% independent or moderate, but there's more registered Democrats than Republicans because there are conservative Democrats. The Democratic Party is a slightly more broad party than the Republican Party, which has shifted far to the right. There's Democrats, you had your blue dog Democrats that are conservative Democrats, and you have your liberal Democrats, and you have your moderates, more like Bill Clinton. So it's going to be a base election. Who drives their people to the polls more? The Obama campaign has invested heavily in their ground game, and so that looks to be their advantage. Mitt Romney's more going towards the air with commercials. So we'll have to see which tactic works. That's going to, I think, drive campaigns in the future. What happens now? If Mitt Romney wins, then they're going to say, okay, the air game still wins. The campaign ads on TV, that's still the best way to go. Get a lot of money and put out a bunch of ads. If Obama manages to hang on and win, he has a small lead now. If he's able to use this and win, then people are going to start saying, hey, the ground game is where it's at from now on. That's where you got to be. But his speech, like I said, very general. He had his soaring moments. He finished very strong, I thought. Came on strong at the end. Not his best speech. Again, like I said, not the best of the night. I'm going to actually go ahead and rank the speeches. I thought Bill Clinton had the best of the convention. It was the longest. I love it. He went through the facts. He took all these attacks Republicans have brought against Obama, and he answered every one of them. Fact checkers said some of the stuff was wrong, but a lot of it, fact checkers went over, was correct. And, Bill Clinton, his gift is he has a way of taking this policy talk that Obama gets accused of being a professor when he talks about it, and people don't want to hear that. Bill Clinton is able to, humanize it, put it in a way people understand and want to hear. And he did that point by point with almost every major Republican attack on Obama. He answered all of them. And it was just a great speech. The speech was nearly 50 minutes long, and, some people were tweeting they were bored, and especially mostly Republicans. My Twitter was lit up full of that from my Republicans I follow. But I was not bored. It was very intriguing, to hear him go point by point and answer all of these attacks. The second best speech I thought was John Kerry tonight. It was a much shorter speech. He was not one of the, prime time speakers. But wow, he gave, like I said, to me, a really good speech. What was his line? I thought probably the best line of the convention. Because going into the convention, one of the big talking points that you've heard from Republicans, and Fox News has been touting it out all week between the Republican convention and the Democratic convention, was, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Well, John Kerry turned that question on its head. He said, why don't you ask Osama bin Laden if he's better off than he was 4 years ago? That brought the House down. That was a powerful line. It ties together, Obama's foreign policy successes to his supposed economic failings. It kind of overshadows it because that's a big deal. Osama bin Laden is a name that carries a lot of weight in this country for what he did. And that kind of line, just like the line, Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. These type of things, these type of slogans, they matter. And that was a very powerful line. I expect to hear that again from pundits, from campaigners going forward. And he had a lot of big attacks. He went after Romney about flip-flopping, which Kerry was also accused of himself back in his campaign in 2004. And he kind of made light of that in a funny moment. But very strong speech from him. At number 3, I would put Michelle Obama. She gave a very good speech. Hers, of course, was all emotion. There wasn't no policy in there. It was, good, a first lady speech, So you had pundits saying, some were saying, especially Democrats, she should run for president. I mean, she was a great speaker. Like I said, it was the third best speech I thought of the whole convention. But I didn't get that kind of impression that she should run for office or anything. Just because you give a speech doesn't mean you should run for president. But it was a good speech, and she is an excellent speaker. I have to say that. I couldn't really remember much of what she said back in 2008 when she spoke, or when she spoke between then. She's got a great personality I've seen, in all her TV interviews and all that. And the way she conveyed emotion was just excellent. So it was a great speech, well written, excellently performed. And that would I would put that at number 3. Number 4, I think, was President Obama's speech tonight. Obama, one of the best speech givers in the country, in politics, probably the best right now. his delivery is perfect. He stresses things the right way. He he's just able to make them seem more epic. He took what I would say was an average speech, if you probably read it on paper, and he kind of uplifts it. He makes it more epic. And I have it at number 4. At number 5, I would put Joe Biden's speech tonight. Like I said, one of his better speeches. And I think, and you're starting to hear some rumbles from this in the press now, finally. I think the Republican Party is underestimating Joe Biden. This is a guy, he's all you hear about now is the gaffes he's made and all that, and he's every politician makes gaffes. That's absurd. He doesn't even make more really than anybody else. He's just on a bigger profile now, so you hear about it more. But this is a very smart guy. He's very smart, very intelligent. He's been in Washington for a long time. Very knowledgeable on foreign policy. I still think he was right to this day about Iraq. He believes that the country should have been split up into the three different countries for the 3 different groups. The Kurds in the north, the Shia, and the Sunni should have been split. And there's still trouble in Iraq now, and I think history is going to prove him right, that we should have split that country up, that, the British, after World War I or World War II, I forget which, came in and just draw arbitrary lines on a map, split up this area. That didn't need to hold anymore. These are not people that hold any nationalist feelings together. They were, they're 3 different groups, and they needed to be separated. I feel like he was right on that, and he's ridiculed after the surge was apparently successful, but now even still Iraq is unstable. So, and Republicans licking their chops at him and Ryan debating, I think they're going to better be careful what they wish for, because they just might get it. Biden, very strong on policy, and that's going to be an interesting debate. And tonight's speech, I thought, showed, his appeal. It wasn't so much on policy tonight, it was more on the emotion. And he's able to do that very well. Very good on the emotion. Overall, the convention, I thought, went very well for Democrats. It did seem, I was watching Fox News post coverage, and somebody said they were more charged up at that convention than they were in Tampa for the Republicans, and I agree with that. It definitely seemed more energized. The speakers seemed more energized, and I think that's because, like I said, they have passion for their candidate. They like him, whereas the Republican, it's more about hatred for the other team. It's about hatred of Obama and dislike of Obama, and that's just never as strong. It's like, they, say love is stronger than hate, and I definitely think we saw that there. Coverage of that. I want to talk about the coverage a little bit, because I watched both. I watched MSNBC and CNN. I didn't watch the mainstream. I like to hear the partisan talk on these conventions afterwards. So I watched MSNBC most nights and taped Fox to watch it after the fact, because last week I watched Fox after, because it's the conservative network, so I wanted to hear the conservatives' takes first on the conservative party. This week I wanted to hear the liberal network on the liberal party. So I watched MSNBC. I thought they did pretty good. Typical what you'd expect. They fawned all over it. But they did a very good job of breaking it down. And I was actually surprised to see they beat Fox in the ratings on Tuesday night. First time they've ever beat Fox on a major event. So that was pretty interesting to see. But I thought they did a very good job. They had a good lineup with Rachel Maddow. Who did they have? Ed Schultz, Chris Hayes. I like Chris Hayes, very intelligent guy, gives very good analysis, digs deep into the details. They had the Reverend Al Sharpton, and they had Steve Schmidt, who was the campaign advisor to John McCain. Fox, as you would expect, was very negative in their portrayal most of the time. They came out right after every speech, coming out, fact checks and, negative. Everything was bad. One thing that disappointed me really was Charles Krauthammer, who is one of my favorite conservative pundits, commentators. He usually gives very good thoughts on all, things politics. But I think he's kind of just went a little bit too much on the Kool-Aid drinker on this event. He was negative on everything, even the Clinton speech, which was almost universally praised, with some Republican commentators even saying this election was over after that speech. And he thought it was bad, and I really think he did himself a disservice. I think he let partisanship take over, and he didn't really critically think his opinion out this time. It was just, bash the other side, and that kind of disappointed me, because I am a big fan of his, and I usually enjoy hearing his opinions. and it was just seemed like he sipped on a cup of haterade. That's going to do it for tonight's show. Check in. We'll have tomorrow the jobs report comes out. We will have another show talking about that, and we'll see you then.